Next step is we're going to build a macro to calculate the excess return matrix. This is the same as what we did last time in the last week's VisualBasic. Alright, so let's go into VisualBasic. Now, the other thing to note with this week's, the other thing we're doing slightly different is we're building the macro piece by piece sort of thing. Because what we want to create at the end of this is something that will create this variance covariance matrix from scratch. So we'll have to do all the parts, the macro we build, we'll have to do all these component parts in order to create this. So we're kind of building it step by step. So in order to get, so we're going to build this excess return matrix. But in order to do that, we're going to copy all the code from calculating the mean, and then we're going to build upon that. Okay, so now we're going to add a line that will calculate the excess return matrix, again as double. So Y is the array for the excess return matrix. And now we need the number of rows. To know the number of rows, because remember the excess return matrix covers all the years and stocks, so we need columns and rows, so we need to define the number of rows. So we'll just get it to count the number of rows in the return, so that's counting the number of years. So it'll count the number of years in that there, which is returns. And then we need to define, so that defines means. Now we need to define excess returns. So we'll go, similar to what we did before, we'll go redim Y number of rows to number of columns. So that'll make it number of rows high by number of columns wide. And we need to define that as double to indicate that it's two-dimensional. So that defines the size of array Y. And now we'll run this embedded macro like we did last week. So for every single column, so 1 to the number of columns, and then every single row, 1 to the number of rows, calculate Y by getting, this is very similar to the code last week, getting the cells there and then subtracting the X column. So this is why we need to sort of build upon it. So even though we're calculating the excess return matrix here, we still have to define X and do all the kind of mean return stuff we did in the first problem, because this is using that because it's going Y equals returns minus X. So it needs to know what X is. That's why we need to define it again in this new macro. And we'll keep building, like in the next macro we'll use all of this this code, and then in the final macro we use all of the code from the macro before. So we're building it one step at a time. Alright, so we'll do that for every single row and then every single column. And then once that's happened, then we just need to display it. So we say for each column from 1 to the number of columns. Sorry, no col I should have put there. And then for each row within each column, So make the range excess. So we need to define that range excess, like we did last week. To define that's where the place we want to put it. So that's defined as excess. So make range excess equal to that y calculation that we've done up here. And then do that for every single row, so next row, and then do that for every single column. And that's it, that should calculate our excess return matrix. So let's go back here, run that macro. Bam, there's our excess return matrix.